did it. You're here. Congratulations. We're so proud of you for taking time to think about your own well-being, and we thank you for that.
Yes, welcome to Mindful Eating 101, presented by Well Balanced Nutrition.
Couple quick reminders as always. Grab your notebook. Got lots of good information for you today. Grab something cool or hot to drink, whatever suits your fancy, and join us in the chat box with your questions and comments. Other than that,
absolutely. And I forgot to put in a slide to introduce ourselves, so I'll do that quickly. We are Well Balanced Nutrition, registered dietitians. We are your friendly nutrition coaches who help you through behavior change. I am Kristen Norton.
I am Lucy Hayhurst.
And we have one other lovely dietitian, Bella, who is not on this call, but she is usually on some of our other workshops. So what you'll learn today is, what's this big fuss about mindfulness? You may have heard it come up several times and you're like, what's going on with this? We'll tell you what is mindful eating. We'll talk about mindful versus mindless eating. And most importantly, 4 strategies to get you started. So you can leave this presentation with at least one little thing that you can go experiment with.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't have to be all 4, y'all. Just focus on the one thing. What's the one thing that jumps out at you today? What's mindfulness? I love these pictures. Kristen actually picked these photos for us, and it's really neat because mindfulness is more than just about the monk sitting on the mountain with their eyes closed, meditating, though that is one form of mindfulness. It can also be seen in older populations. This is a centenarian, and probably easier to be mindful as we get on with our lives and less distracted by the everyday hustle and bustle. And then, the picture of us, this is actually Kristen and myself and some of our closest loved ones on an adventure in Costa Rica, where we got to really be in that present moment. And that's really what mindfulness is all about, is just being present. Maybe you're being present at a family or friend get together where, we're not distracted and just scrolling through our phone mindlessly. But as you can see with these photos, these are not our everyday lives necessarily. These were all very planned and plotted types of experiences, or gotten through years of life experience. But that's what we want to just start with, is recognizing that mindfulness isn't going to happen on accident. That's why it's called a practice. And we encourage you to find ways to do that throughout your day. And we're going to talk a whole lot more about that. So we know that this is what mindfulness can look like. What about the other side of this coin?
So it may be easier for monks who are set up in that environment, or maybe those who are living in Costa Rica and just more connected with nature and life is a little slower. But for us, for the culture in America, it's often hustle and bustle, and we got to get to this meeting, got to get to carpool, got to drop off at sports. Maybe you're eating at your desk. Maybe you're skipping meals because you're so busy and you really don't want to take the time away from productivity. And then that leaves you in the fridge at night because your body's finally able to say, hey, feed me, I'm hungry. So that is where we are today. It's not as easy unless we're very intentional to be mindful. And so we just want to let you know that we understand we're living in this world too. And so our approach to mindful eating is, I'd like to say, as practical as possible. So
as possible. Yes, that's our mission. And I want to just take a moment, drop a 1 in the chat box if any of this is resonating. Eating on the go, eating distractedly in front of your computer, missing a meal because you were so busy. Maybe just let us know. Does that resonate for anybody else? I always thought that was crazy. I was like, I don't know how people can miss meals. But I had, a weekend day the other week where it was just like, oh man, it's 11 o'clock. I haven't had food yet, because you just kind of get preoccupied, and it happens. Bella's out there. She says all of the above. So we're being real with you guys. We're not perfect at this.
Absolutely. So I want to take a minute to talk about why behavior change is hard, right? If we want to become more mindful eaters, we've already mentioned that it'll be intentional, and that might be a major change for us. So the way our brains work, our brains like to be efficient. So once we learn something, then it's going to hold on to that behavior like a habit loop, and it's going to keep doing that automatically for us. So as we're going throughout the day, working, doing things mindlessly, our brain is just kind of on autopilot, doing the things that it's already learned. And behavior change can be hard because we really have to tap into that moment, understand what's going on in that habit loop, and really be intentional about breaking that loop or changing that habit loop to one that is better for us.
Yeah, I tell people that the brain is the laziest organ in your body. It's like, it's a lot of effort and energy every time you're learning something new. If you've ever noticed when you're learning new things that you feel really tired, and that's because it's like your brain got on the treadmill and ran for an hour. So that's why our brain is the laziest, because it uses a lot of energy when we have to figure out how to do something over and over again. So anytime it can go on autopilot, it's saving calories, saving energy.
Yeah, and that reminds me too of that behavior change tends to be a whole lot harder at the end of the day because we've run out of mental energy, and it's harder to stop ourselves from that autopilot mode.
Yes.
Before we dive in, I'm curious to hear from you. If you're watching the replay or maybe on Facebook, you might not see this, but we're going to start a poll to kind of just get a sense of where you are on your mindful eating journey. So some of the responses you could choose are: you haven't even started, you're just learning about it, maybe you've tried it a couple times and you're continuing to learn. Maybe it's a daily practice for you, not necessarily a perfect one. That's my case. It's definitely not perfect, but I try to put some effort in every day. And maybe you're just somewhere in between that daily practice and just starting to learn, trying it out.
Yeah, I think it's like a spectrum for me. Sometimes it is a daily practice, and sometimes I'm like, oh, right, that's a good tool. I keep telling other people to do. I should try that.
Absolutely. So the majority of people said they're either learning about it or they've tried it a couple times and they're continuing to learn. And some said they haven't even started. So this information will be very helpful then, I think.
Yes.
All right.
Today we're going to share those core principles of mindful eating, so you can see them here. And it's that paying attention, right? So that's the first step in mindfulness, is being really present and paying attention in a non-judgmental way. The having that awareness around what you're eating hopefully can also be joyful, but even just the awareness, if it's like, this is really disappointing, that's mindfulness. Noticing the internal and external cues. That means, an example of the cereal that sits on top of the refrigerator. It's like, I'm eating my oatmeal and it's perfectly fine, but gosh, it sure would be nice to have a little bit extra crunch. That's an external cue of causing me to want more, want something different. And then cultivating the balance between choices and accepting our choices. And we'll definitely get more into that, because it's like, we talk about finding those good choices and better choices. It's not all or nothing. It's not black and white.
Yes. So we will dive into these principles throughout this webinar and elaborate on, the strategies to implement them. So again, if it hasn't been apparent, we understand that mindless eating is so easy to do. At a young age, even my children, they like to watch something while they're eating. They do it at school. Every day at lunch, they watch something while they eat. So it is not abnormal to be multitasking anymore. My brain is often like, oh, I should look something up on my phone and read it right now because there's nothing else going on. So it's easy to do, and just bringing ourselves back to the moment over and over as many times as it takes is all that we ask.
I love this. So Kristen put together this really helpful visual to explain that mindful eating cycle and, why paying attention to each of these different questions is the exercise here. It's why am I eating? Well, it's like, well, Lucy, it's breakfast time. I'm eating. But if maybe it's the end of the day and that why am I eating? It's like, actually, I'm tired. And I kind of my brain says I should eat to entertain me or have more energy. Lots of reasons why we eat, when and what. These are all just good opportunities to tune in to. And it's not always easy. And we're not like asking that you have to go through each question. But I do always have my clients try to implement what we call as a mindful pause. So that time between when your brain says like, Cheetos, and before the Cheetos go into your mouth, it's that like, okay, what happened here? And how is this happening? Like, oh, I'm fixing dinner and they were sitting out, the Cheetos, that is. And so I'm just waiting while the food is getting ready and mindlessly eating Cheetos. So that's kind of an example of how and how much. Of course, it's a lot easier to eat excessively. The bag of popcorn, if you were really mindfully paying attention to that, your taste buds might get really bored and just be satisfied physically after about 2/3 of the bag. But if you're watching a movie, then we know it's pretty easy to finish off a tub of popcorn, maybe with a friend, without even blinking an eye, because you're just like hand to mouth. And then this one, for me personally, realizing where do I invest my energy? Where are you eating can be another question. Am I eating in my car because I'm investing energy in running these kids around all over the place? Or, driving an hour or two in from work each day, that where am I investing my energy could give you that answer as to why this has become a feedback loop for you.
Yeah. So looking at the mindful eating cycle, you can really see that mindful eating isn't just slowing down and eating in a room by yourself with no noise. It involves, paying attention non-judgmentally to this whole cycle. Lucy, do you have a story about?
I do. So the first time I was introduced to mindful eating, I didn't really appreciate how much I always ate distractedly beforehand. And we had mindful eating experts from, I think it was Duke, come and give us a mindful eating little exercise within one of our work meetings where Kristen and I used to work. And within that, they did like this full-blown mindful eating exercise, and they turned down the lights. They had us get our plates in silence, no talking aloud, lights down. I had heated up food because I was eating leftovers for breakfast at that point. And so then they're like, sit and look at your meal. And I'm just like watching the steam leave my food and it's getting cold. And then they're like, now lift up the bowl and smell the dish. And, at this point, I'm starting to get like shaking with just anger. Like, I just want to eat my food. And at the next place, it's like, take a bite and then put your fork down. And then I get on my phone. I'm under the table on my phone on Facebook, like, mindful eating, stupid. Don't recommend it. That's not what we're teaching you here, just so you know.
But all that to say is that, we all have our own struggle when we first begin with mindful eating, right? It doesn't always come naturally in our fast-paced world. Thanks for sharing that. So another thing you can pay attention to is, Lucy gave you an example of outer cues. And so you can pay attention to those outer cues and those inner cues. As a child, we are very in touch with when we feel full and satisfied with a meal. And you can witness, a young child like not finishing an ice cream cone per se, like, I'm done. And us adults are like, what? Here, I'll finish it. But we tend to unlearn to listen to those inner cues. And so mindful eating is a chance to get back in touch with that. And what you see here is the hunger scale. And a great place to start when you're trying to connect with your inner cues, because it gives some language around what you might feel. On the upper hand, we call it the danger zone, because you might be starving, you might be hangry. This can be a dangerous place to be, because it often makes it so that we're not able to logically think about our choice. Our body kicks in and our brain kicks in and says, you just need to eat. I don't care what it is, you just need to feed me. The fuel zone is ideally where we can stay and feel comfortable. And this might mean eating regular meals at regular intervals. That's an important part of being a mindful eater, is knowing how often to fuel to stay in this zone. And then the discovery zone is when, if you're always feeling a little bit too full after a meal, maybe bloated or extra tired, then that could be an opportunity to maybe check in a little sooner with yourself as you're eating.
Yeah. And I like to pause here because I'm curious to hear if anybody's willing to share. But I'd love to ask this question of, how do you know when you're hungry? And you can answer in the chat box or just scribble it down on a piece of paper. Like, what does hungry feel like in your body? And if you're kind of doing one of these, like, Lucy, what are you talking about? I get, growling in my stomach, or I feel empty in my stomach. It's like, that's a fairly typical answer, but that's not everybody's truth. For people that have gut health issues, the hunger cues can be a little skewed. I personally I can't wait till I start to feel empty. That's probably way too late. I have to wait until my brain starts to just continually think about food. It's weird, but luckily I've figured it out. And also for people that have been dieting for their lives, it's like been trained out of you, like Kristen said with the ice cream cone. It's pretty easy to go from that satisfied to a few bites too many. And that's not like, oh, shame on you. It's really easy to do because food is delicious and our brains are rewarded for eating, especially more calorie rich foods with extra sugar or salt or fat. But in terms of what hungry feels like, it looks like Susanna says her stomach gets growling, sometimes just feels hungry, and gets the thought like, ooh, I'm hungry. Yeah, that does make sense. Like, oh yeah, oh, that does sound good. I don't know if it happens for you, but like sometimes I'll see certain foods or whatever, like, oh, I guess I am hungry. What about for you, Kristen?
Yeah, I could tell that I'm just not functioning the best. Like I get a little bit of brain fog, I would say. Brain fog, whatever that truly is. And my stomach will growl sometimes.
Mm. Bella tells us she's hashtag always hungry. Eat more plants.
Maybe it has something to do with your training.
That's true. That running, catching up with you. They call it rungry, right? Running hungry. Good stuff.
Yeah.
We'll spend a whole hour on this slide. Just so
Yeah. So I'll just end this slide with, mindful eaters tend to be able to end a meal at satisfaction, and then shortly after feel 100% full, because they have taken some time, they've slowed down, they've paid attention.
Yeah. And I will say, I almost never feel satisfied until a full 30 minutes later. So for anybody else that has slow responses, just know you're not weird. It's every body is different.
That's right. So mindfulness doesn't just happen as you're eating. It can happen in the kitchen. So part of mindful eating is understanding and paying attention to the whole process of cooking food, shopping for food, planning for food. So I think in the kitchen is a perfect opportunity to just tune in and enjoy the process. So it could be just stopping and smelling our cilantro, or it could be, a lot of times I'll put on, and I think Lucy does this too, put on some music and I'll just chop my vegetables, and you're just in the zone in that moment. You're not thinking about all the things. You hear the knife hit the cutting board, and you can just be aware of all of your senses in that moment. And that can be a little moment of mindfulness.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And just FYI, I don't remember if we put a slide in here, but digestion doesn't start in your mouth. It starts in your brain. So for anybody, circling back to our last month's topic of your gut health, if you're having a lot of indigestion with food, it could be that the mindlessness of your eating habits, or if you're just like really, tight, clenched, stressed while eating, that can actually cause indigestion and an upset stomach. So being able to be present with the food, even if it's just like pausing, wow, that smells good, or, oh, I'm so excited to eat this. That is a beautiful way to kind of prep your mind and your body to start eating.
Mm-hmm. That's a perfect segue and gets us into this slide, the mindfulness at meals. So sitting and savoring, Lucy just mentioned how important it is to set up your body and your mind for a restful state before you eat. When your mind is still stressed out, or maybe it's distracted and it's in a little bit of that stressful zone, it's not going to put as much attention and effort into digestion as you want it to. So beyond what Lucy suggested with the deep breath, that's one of my favorites. Sit down and take a deep breath, like, okay, I'm going to eat. I also tell people to just focus on those first 3 bites. Really savor them, really think about them. You can look at your food. You can make sure you're putting your fork down in between each of those 3 bites. And that way I feel like it's a doable approach for someone who's like maybe how Lucy felt when she first had to eat mindfully. Darn this mindful eating thing. Or maybe you're like me and a mom who's, I used to envision family dinner being this like, oh, and it's really just this chaotic time. And and so those first 3 bites are really important because I need to center myself, and, I might get lost in the middle of the meal within the conversation or whatever's going on. But the more you practice at mindful eating, the more you can kind of, you can stop and notice, okay, I'm eating really fast right now. Let me take a deep breath. Let me put my fork back down. It's never too late in a meal to just kind of reconvene yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're like halfway through your lunch, you're like, oh, now you tell me. Just tune us out for just a minute. Oh, good. I still have a few bites. Good stuff. And to answer your question, Thomas, I'm not sure where burping is on the scale for hunger and fullness. For me, it's usually afterwards. Putting it all into practice. Is your mind full? This was a prompt for something else, but I don't remember.
No, it's just a segue into putting it into practice.
That's right. We've got more strategies. So in case we haven't gotten enough strategies, we've got more ideas, more ways to put this into practice.
I'd like to check in maybe just for solidarity. How many people have found yourself at any point in life eating for some other reason besides hunger? Put a 1 in the chat box if you're raising your hand with us. Yeah. Snacking, I wouldn't say it's mindless.
No.
You can definitely snack with intention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good question. Stress eating. All
right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining in. Solidarity. We all eat sometimes outside of hunger, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Mindfulness is all about just being aware. And once we're aware, we can be more intentional about whether that is helping us, whether it's a neutral habit or whether it's a harmful habit. So, Lucy, tell us about strategy number 1.
All right, strategy number 1. That is journaling. Oh my gosh, y'all. Don't get me started about journaling, but since we're here anyway. Strategy number 1 of just planning ahead. It's almost always, we're going to make more mindful choices when we've thought beforehand what we're eating or what we're planning to eat. So with that, it's, something simple as when I'm taking my walk in the morning, I think about like, oh, hey, what am I going to have for lunch today? That's not necessarily a journal, but that is one strategy that it works well for me. And then again, back to the idea that we've been talking about where we eat for more reasons than just hunger. If you have an idea in your mind of what you're going to eat throughout the day, then that's going to help you make those better choices. Because like Kristen said before, at the end of the day, we're probably not going to make our best choices because our brains are exhausted. We're going to fall into default mode, which isn't always salads and grilled salmon. So having that practice of writing it down, having a practice of tuning into your hunger and fullness, like we talked about, and then tuning into our emotions, which we're going to talk a little bit more about as well.
Absolutely. And so journaling can look very different. You can start just by journaling how hungry you feel before, during, and after a meal based on that hunger scale, and how you're feeling at a meal. You can journal your symptoms. So just starting to take down some data is a very helpful strategy. And that alone is going to help you be more mindful because you have to think about it to write it down.
Strategy number 2, recognize stress and emotional eating. Hitting the pause button. For anybody that is familiar with HALT, it is a commonly used acronym in any kind of addiction treatment. But HALT is helpful because not only is it a good reminder of like pause, halt, it's an acronym that can remind us like, hey, let's ask these questions. Am I eating, or do I want to eat because I'm hungry? So that's step one. Is it H? Am I hungry? So you can kind of tune in like, well, yeah, it's been a few hours, or maybe it hasn't, but breakfast was just really unsatisfying. So even though I just ate, maybe I'm still hungry. And then, am I angry or frustrated? Is the A. Am I feeling lonely or bored? It's pretty common. Or my number one go-to reason for eating outside of hunger is tired. I'm just tired. And then of course, as the emojis remind us, there's a whole slew of other emotions that we feel that make us want to eat. And sometimes it's things like joy. We eat in celebration all the time. That's culturally appropriate. It's not something to be ashamed about. It doesn't mean that we can't eat and enjoy mindfully. That's the trick, is recognizing the emotion and then making a decision mindfully what choice we're gonna make.
Mm-hmm. Before I was aware of mindful eating and more mindful of my decisions, I would always be eating out of procrastination. So if I was not looking forward to something, whether that was studying for a hard test, putting my kids to bed, cleaning my house, food, that'll help. You don't have to start if you have food.
Right.
There's mine. So once you're able to practice halt, putting that pause between the trigger to eat and the actual choice to eat, you can really find balance and freedom in your choices. So from a diet or restriction standpoint, you're always denying yourself of certain foods that such diet has deemed off limits. And those are usually like pretty tasty foods. Maybe it's chocolate or dessert or ice cream. So does that really work long term, to always deny? Not really. No, it just swings you back to the other side usually. It's a violent pendulum. And then if we always indulge, what is the result of that? If we're just led everywhere that our cravings or our emotions are driving us, does that feel like freedom, or is that helpful or, bringing you happiness and balance? Probably not. So mindful eating really brings you to the middle, where you find that freedom of pausing, asking yourself, what do I want? Why do I want that? What does my body need? Acting like a curious scientist and really paying attention, being in that moment, allows you to choose with intention and non-judgment, whatever that result is. So if you choose to indulge in that craving, then you do it and you enjoy it. If you're like, well, you know what? Cake sounds good, but I don't think I really like cake when it comes down to it. Then you don't really need to eat it. So that's kind of what mindful eating can do for you, is open up that window of freedom.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's amazing when you give yourself that permission. I gave this example, I believe it was just last month. It's like, when you give yourself permission, then it can take away some of the power, where it's like, I can't eat cake because I always overeat it. And now I keep cake in the freezer. So if I'm ever having a hankering, then I can have some. And generally I don't want it, because I would rather have something that feels like better in my body, more nourishing. So permission is a powerful tool, believe it or not.
Yes.
Building up your toolbox. These are just a few of many different ways. But as we've noted, lots of us are eating out of stress, eating outside of hunger for other reasons. And it's because food is it's so fun. It's so comforting. And there's other ways to have fun and comfort. So one thing that not always, often works for me is to go on a walk. So including some movement is a really great tool that works for me. I'd love to know if there's specific movement that works for y'all. I know some people are runners. Some people, like myself, I've recently rediscovered Zumba. There's yoga, all that kind of good stuff. But that's an important one. Dancing, a self-soothing activity, and there's like endless options. I'm curious if Kristen has examples there.
I actually have 20 of them. So just a word on building up your toolbox is it's not only for in those moments, those very moments where you're feeling that emotion and you need something, but also just on a daily basis to find things that fill your cup, that provide your body with the fuel it needs. The movement can be a stress reduction just on a regular basis, is joyful movement. And then the therapy is something we always recommend because I think absolutely everybody could benefit from talking to a therapist. So being proactive and doing these kind of self-soothing activities on a regular basis, taking that time for self-care, and then also, having them as a backup. So if you're really being mindful in the moment and thinking, oh, I'm really being triggered to eat right now because I had a really rough day at work and I'm really tired and exhausted and frustrated. And then you can ask yourself, what do I need? What would be really good right now? And that could be sitting down and mindfully enjoying a snack, or it could be one of these self-soothing activities. And I have a little bonus for everybody today. I'm going to share this file. It's 20 ways to soothe without food. So they're just 20 little activities. It could be like a little mindfulness activity. It could be calling a friend. I encourage you to take that list and make your own, right? Like circle all the ones that resonate with you and then add on any ones that you want. And I have a current client who made her list, has 10 things, and she has posted it several different places so that she can be reminded to do at least one of those things every day.
I love that. That's awesome. Yay. Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
Strategy 3, identifying your triggers. That's so big. This is the work, you talk about, which mentioned therapy as a helpful tool, and identifying your triggers is such an important part of that. So we've talked a little bit about this, I think on a high level of the cereal on the fridge or the Cheetos on the counter, the candy dishes at the office. Those are those external triggers that might just cause us to want to eat. I believe there used to be some M&Ms at somebody's office that was just really tempting to grab handfuls of, especially after stressful meetings. So that's real. That's out there and that's happening. And then there's the internal cues, like we mentioned, with those different thoughts and feelings physiologically, different reasons that we eat. Hunger being one of them, of course, but lots of other things that happen as well. Learning your triggers is a lot of the work that we do with our clients, is just helping to hold space for these conversations, because it's probably not conversations that you're necessarily having with anybody else. You might not even realize that. I'm trying to think of a good one. I don't know if you have a good one, Kristen, but I had a client, a dentist, every day. She would get home from school or get home from work a little bit before her kids got off the bus for school. And she would not have, she ate, but it wasn't quite enough. So she found herself in the pantry, just like chowing down on the kids' after school snacks. And she figured out I'm just not eating enough during the day to keep myself going. So that was an important realization, and she wouldn't have figured that out without talking it through.
Yeah. And a good place to go back to is that mindful eating cycle where we had all of those questions, and that paying attention a little bit to each one, or maybe focusing on one at a time to start paying attention to can help you identify your triggers and then start to have conversations with your dietitian or therapist around.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy number 4. So we would be silly to not mention balanced eating, because when your body has the fuel that it needs, the adequate fuel that it needs, then it is a lot easier to just function and to be able to think at a higher level. And also we can manage our expectations of what food is going to bring us. Usually it brings us, it can rotate, depending on the situation, the environment. But food is fuel, but it could also be comforting and nourishing. We also choose food to protect our health. Sometimes it could be entertaining, but to always expect our food to bring us comfort or to be like the best meal we've ever had, just fireworks, that's not as realistic as we want it to be, right? So sometimes we're just eating for that fuel factor. Sometimes we're eating to entertain. And it's just kind of bringing yourself into the moment and reality with what you're expecting your food to do for you.
Yep. Yeah, I had to get real with myself on this one, because not every meal is going to be the best thing you've ever had. But if it satisfies you and gives you some energy to keep going, then it got the job done.
I think we really fall into this because restaurant meals and quick restaurants or fast food meals can be so palatable, right? They've got all of the flavors and all of the things that when we're into that, just how instant gratification is such a big part of our world, always having a really satisfying meal when you're eating out, and then you maybe switch to eating your food at home, can be a little bit tricky to just come to terms with.
That's a good point. Be flexible and compassionate. I don't know if this is a strategy, but it is a good always reminder. I have a friend of mine that says, if you're not kind to yourself, how can you expect anybody else to be? So that compassion part, we've done lots of presentations on self-compassion, and it is a helpful tool when it comes to being mindful. As Kristen mentioned a couple times, that non-judgmental place is important. And even when it comes to our well-balanced plate, it's easy to think like, oh well, I'm failing, or I'm not doing it right, or Lucy and Kristen and Bella wouldn't be proud of me because there's not enough colorful food on this plate, or whatever the story is. That, first of all, not true. We are proud of you. If you are eating consistently, yay, applause. If you're eating food that fuels your body well, that's awesome. So that flexibility, sometimes it is like, okay, today's vegetables are the lettuce and tomato and pickles on my sandwich. That's I'm having to be flexible today, and that's okay. So just good reminders that we are hardwired to be judgmental. That is a survival technique for yourself to keep living. But judging yourself harshly doesn't help you make better choices down the road. Actually, it can have the opposite effect.
Exactly. So as you dive more and more into trying mindful eating, practicing it on a daily basis, remember that last core principle is that you're aware, you are choosing balance, choice, wisdom, and acceptance of what is. So acceptance comes into play when we're noticing our emotions. So when we stop and realize, I'm just really procrastinating because there's this big thing in front of me that feels so scary and I don't want to do it. Accepting that that's that's okay, right? It's okay to feel that way. We're not going to judge ourselves for feeling that way. We're not going to judge ourselves for wanting a certain food. So being compassionate with ourselves and knowing that it's just our human nature at times to do something like that. So acceptance is huge here.
Where do we begin? We would love to know from you all, what's one strategy that you picked up from our presentation today? What's something that you can try on today or sometime this week? Remembering we've got the deep breath. We've got our first 3 bites. We've got the eating in balance, the halt. I could probably keep going, but hopefully you wrote down what strategy really calls out to you. And recognizing that, maybe the first thing you try isn't going to be the winner. I don't remember how it started, but I kind of just decided, like, for paying attention, I was going to do lunchtime because that seemed like the easiest to do. And so I picked lunchtime and try to do a mindful lunch where I'm not looking at my phone. I will put on a podcast, which I think is okay. It's figuring out how to make it doable for you. And Bella says she's going to try the self-soothing. There's so many ways to do it. Yeah, she loves the options. Susanna's going to try the first 3 bites and the deep breath. Good stuff.
And remember, progress over perfection. Mindful eaters who practice daily still are not perfect. They're still going to overeat at times. They're going to be mindless at times. So you can still be in a mindful eating practice and not be 100% perfect all the time. It's just how it is. Really like the first 2 bites paired with a deep breath. Good. Yes. I think it will help center me in both mindful eating, and that will likely ripple into the rest of my day. Oh, yes. 100. I agree. I love it. Well, I can't wait to see how you guys react and to these strategies and what works well for all of you.
We would love to continue the conversation with you guys. We've got a few different ways to plug in if you're not already connected with us. Of course, you get our monthly check-ins via email, but we've also got a wonderful little group over on Facebook, the Nutrition Know-How for a Well-Balanced Life. So if you're on Facebook, come join us there, join the conversation. You get your Tuesday produce tips and just other fun nuggets throughout the week. And then we've got our Instagram account at Well Balanced Nutrition NC. And if you're thinking, hey, I need a little bit more one-on-one support to put this into practice, then pop on over to the website, wellbalancednutrition.com. If you press the button that says Get Started, then you can book a call with one of the 3 of us today. I don't think it'll let you book today, but you could probably get on the calendar tomorrow or Friday, and we would love to have that conversation with you.
Absolutely. And that is all we have for you today on Mindful Eating. It was a lot to digest, pun intended. So I hope you took good notes, and I hope that you go off and practice and experiment with mindful eating. And I would love for you to join our Facebook group or schedule that clarity call, as Lucy said. And I just thank you for your time and joining us and putting this effort into your own health and well-being.
Yes. And if you have any last minute questions, pop into the chat box. We'll hang out for a minute, but otherwise, we are so grateful for you. Thank you for coming and taking some time to think about your own health and well-being. Susanna's following on Insta. Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Looks like everybody's heading out.
All right. We will end it now.
Enjoy the journey.
Take care, y'all.